Morning. Thank you for worshiping with us here at Calvary Bible Church in Thornton. We've been working our way through the book of Luke together in this series that we've called Good News for All People. And we've been hitting this theme pretty hard over the last few weeks. We've seen that we have this good Father who loves to give gifts, that he is bringing his kingdom, his redemptive reign over all, that he is making all things new, that he will restore all things. And this is something that is meant for all people. He's bringing together people from the east and the west, from the north and the south, from all over to be invited into this kingdom. Today, we are going to wrap up this first half of the book of Luke. We're going to put a pause in following this Sunday as we go into our Christmas series. Do not worry, we will be back in Luke in January 8th, but we wanted to take this time to go through a series that we're calling Wonder, looking at the awe and amazement, the earth-shattering aspect of Jesus coming into this world. To do this, we're going to look back at the book of Isaiah to see these promises that were given of what God would do to restore people. Then we'll go to the New Testament to see where is the hope that's given for us as we look forward to the day when full fulfillment will come. For our parents in here, I want to draw your attention to these Advent bags that we have put together for you. They're located in the kids' hallway. They're these blue gift bags with, I think they have yellow tissue paper coming out of them. They're very visible. I want to direct you to them because these are a 5-week devotional that we've put together for you with some activities and some time that you could spend with your kids that goes along with this Wonder series. So it will follow the Sunday that we've had together, so then you can take what we've been learning in here and help pass that on to your kids as well. This doesn't start until next week after our first Sunday in Wonder, but we have them available for you now so you can grab them and be prepared for hopefully having this be a helpful thing to help point your kids to Jesus in this time of awaiting his arrival. We have a lot of other events and aspects coming up in the next few weeks. We have Women's Brunch, which is coming up the first Saturday in December. We have Carols and Campfires, which is coming up as well. All of these you can find information about in your bulletin, or we have flyers in the back. Grab a handful of them, pass them out to people. These are easy events to invite people to. But we still have one more week in Luke, and so I want to make sure we are doing the passage justice as we go through Luke chapter 14 together. Luke 14. As you're turning there, if you want to follow along with us, I want to look first at verse 25, where we see this phrase that's been used over the last few weeks, and it's a great crowds accompanied Jesus. That Jesus is traveling towards Jerusalem, and along the way, there's these crowds of people that are following him. And Jesus is using this opportunity to teach the people in this time. And what we see just before this in chapter 14 is there's this teaching of this feast, there's this teaching of this great banquet, which are pointing towards the day when God's kingdom come, his redemptive reign comes. And he's likening it, like we saw last week, he is likening it to this feast, this beautiful time, this bountiful time of peace and prosperity, of ease and relaxation, that as God's kingdom come, it restores all things. And while some reject entering into this kingdom, entering this feast, it is an invitation that is freely given to all. These crowds are following Jesus, and Jesus continues over the last few chapters to make the same point over and over again. Enter the kingdom. Strive to enter the kingdom. Make every effort to enter through the narrow door. And maybe we've been picking up on this. I'm already using the word kingdom, and you're thinking, oh, great, here we go again with it. But This is such an important topic. It garners so much focus because of how impactful the kingdom is. God's reign coming into this world, chaos being righted, things that are broken being restored, all things being redeemed. This kingdom is so important to be taught, and it seems like it's being done so because this crowd is not getting it. That just because they're following Jesus doesn't mean that they're following Jesus as a disciple, putting their trust and hope in him. And so this topic continues to come up. Let me put it this way. You are spending a lot of time in the service together, seated in the chair that you're currently sitting in. And yet we spend little to no time telling you how to sit in that chair. As well, most of you will be spending a good amount of this service breathing. And yet we didn't give out any instructions on how to breathe. You are all pretty adept at it. And so why does Jesus continue to spend so much time teaching about the kingdom? Because they're not getting it. They're not understanding the impact of it. They're not fully following Jesus in the way that he has called them to. They're not putting their trust in him. They're not seeing the beauty and the purpose of God's kingdom coming in. They are not fully understanding it. I like how one commentator put it. He says, "Is this march towards Jerusalem a parade? Well, the crowds must think so. Everyone loves a parade. I disagree. Parades are awful. But the point still stands that they are caught up in the excitement of the moment. There is something special about this man. He's doing these incredible works. He is speaking with authority. The crowds are amazed, and yet they don't seem to be putting their trust in him. And so Jesus continues to teach on this topic. The kingdom is coming. The kingdom is in your midst. It is incredible. Make every effort to enter through the narrow door, which makes us ask this question. Why are they following Jesus? Is it out of obedience? Or is it just because they think something interesting is going on? Is this march towards Jerusalem really just a parade for them? And the question goes to us as well. What are we doing with this information about Jesus? I mean, think of all the songs that we just sang. How marvelous. There's so much praise and exaltation in all of this. But do we really mean what it is that we're singing? And there's certainly some times that are hard. To sing all these praise songs today, it's been tough for me. I've been really struggling with my headspace because we have yet another tragedy, and so it's hard to praise in these times when I'm mourning. I'm so grateful for Eileen speaking truth into me before coming up. Otherwise, I don't know how I'd be up here. But let alone when we're not feeling the emotions of the praise songs. What about the truth of what's behind it? That there is still so much in my life that I turn to for comfort, for satisfaction, for directions, for fulfillment. And to sing of how God is deserving of my praise, I don't always mean that when I'm singing it. And there's an aspect of this that's okay, that we're all far from perfect. But what is my focus? What is my drive? Overall, what is it that I'm pursuing? Is it Jesus? Or am I looking at these other things as well? Am I trying to find fulfillment apart from him? And so in this passage that we have today, Jesus uses jarring language to get our attention, to rattle loose from us the default position that we have of looking to ourselves for satisfaction, looking to ourselves for answers. And yet the language isn't just to get our attention. That in this passage today, Jesus is speaking rather harshly to show us the cost of discipleship. We are saved by the free gift of God. God did this out of his love for us. We did nothing to earn our salvation. He did not do this because of anything that we've generated for ourselves. We are saved by grace. And yet we respond to that grace with discipleship. And we see that discipleship, following Jesus, is the costliest thing there is. It takes everything. Let me show this in Luke 14. picking it up in verse 25. Verse 25 says this. Now great crowds accompanied him. And he turned, this is Jesus, he turned and said to them, if anyone comes after me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. So again, we have this jarring language here. Jesus says, if anyone does not hate his father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters. This is why I was at my holiest when I was a child. I was really good at hating my sisters growing up. But he says to hate even your own life. What is going on in this passage? That unless if you do this, you cannot be called a follower of Jesus. Well, one of the things that we hold to be true and what we're so grateful for is we say that the Bible is clear, that anyone can read it and understand who God is, what he has done, how we can be saved, how we are to live. Any person with a good translation can understand that in their own language. And we're grateful that we have other Christians that we could be around that we can read together. We say the Bible is clear. That doesn't mean there aren't parts that are hard to understand. That there are parts that we come across and we don't get. It doesn't seem clear. And this is where we need to make whatever effort we can to understand the author at the time. What was being said back then, to understand the culture, the purpose of the writing. That when we come here together, I'm not up here because I have some sort of secret knowledge that I'm doling out to everyone. That's not it at all. That we all have work to do because Thornton in 2022 is just a little bit different than Israel in the first century. And that while God still speaks today, we need to try to understand what God said so that we can understand what God is saying now. And as you look at the culture at the time, there's this Semitic construction, this Jewish phrasing that talks about loving one thing and hating the other. You see it all over the Old Testament. This I have loved, this other thing I have hated. Now, when you and I use the word hate, we mean that something is repulsive or it's disgusting. It is undignified. I don't even want to be near it. Like we all might say, we hate Christmas decorations up before Thanksgiving, which means it is such a disgusting thing that we don't even want to be around it. Anyone in their right mind would not think about doing such a thing. Emily. But when hate was used at this time, it's in this construction of this one thing is loved, this other thing is hated. The emphasis, the focus there, the thrust is on the love. That this one thing is loved so much that it's as if this other thing is hated when you compare the two. That it's not saying that this other thing is disgusting, but it is to be loved less, considered less, thought of less. And so what this passage is saying is not to find your family or yourself repulsive, but to love them less when compared to Jesus. Don't believe me on that? That's okay, I wouldn't either. But let me go to Matthew's account of this. You don't have to flip to it, but this is how Matthew records the exact same teaching from Jesus, and it captures that meaning that I'm pointing to. This is Matthew 10, verse 37. Jesus is speaking. He says, whoever loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Exact same meaning, just worded slightly differently. And so what we're seeing here is this call to not find family repulsive, to not be disgusted with yourself, but instead love Jesus more than all others. And this interpretation makes sense, right? I mean, think of all the commands that we have to love others, to honor our father and mother. That's hard to do if we hate them in the way that we tend to use the word hate. Instead, Jesus is saying to love him more than all others. To make this point, I like this quote from one of the commentators. He says, a person who commits himself or herself to Christ will develop a greater love for both neighbor and family. By following Jesus, we have a greater love for others. Although, at times, loving and following Christ may be seen as a renunciation, rejection, or hate if the family does not share the same commitment. So we have a greater love for others by following Jesus. As we see how much love Jesus has poured out on us, that overflows onto others. We can't contain it. We can't stop it. We love others naturally because of how much we have been loved. And yet, following Jesus does have consequences at times with other people. One of the things that kept popping up as I was prepping for this passage is story after story of families that are divided when someone follows Jesus. The phrase I heard far too often is, "You're not my son. You're not my daughter," when someone decided to follow Jesus. Friendships can be impacted by this. Maybe you've experienced this, but conversations can go a whole different direction when people find out that you call yourself a Christian. But in all of this, it's what is my focus? What is my drive? What is my priority? Like others in here, I care far too often at times about what other people might think about me. In fact, I think we all might. Even those people who say that they don't care what other people think about them, they seem really adamant about making sure that you know they don't care what other people think about them. But in all of this, what is my priority? Because there's a warning here as well, that if anyone is looking to follow Jesus, but holding on to a greater love for anything or anyone else, well, the phrase used is, "He cannot be my disciple." It is a love for Jesus fully and completely. Instead, Jesus shows us how we are to live. This was verse 27. I read it earlier. But it says this, "Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple." Now, we talked about this a little bit back, I think it was chapter 9, when Jesus says something very similar. And for us, the idea of crucifixion, the cross, it's something that we're used to. It's a symbol that we put front and center in this room. It's a symbol that unites Christians ever since there have been Christians. It's the reminder of how we are saved, how we are able to enter the kingdom, that following Jesus is not only possible, but it is better. And we get that idea from the reminder of the cross. And yet, at the time in this culture, the thought of a rabbi, a Jewish person, a Jewish teacher telling people to identify themselves with the cross, well, that is unthinkable. It is unimaginable. It's incredibly undignified. It's worse than Christmas decorations up before Thanksgiving, which we all just agreed is the worst thing possible. It's worse even than that. Because the cross was this very public, very visible, very deliberate form of death. That it was also a very grossly inefficient way to kill someone. And I mean that in more ways than one. It is a slow, agonizing death. And the public nature of it, how visible it is to others, it was meant to act as a warning that when other people saw the cross, saw how terrible it was, the message was loud and clear to not be like them. And yet when we see the cross, we don't have that same message come to us. That yes, while the cross is a place where there is no dignity, there's no hiding from the people looking at you. There's no covering up your shame while on the cross. It's a place of abject self-denial. And yet when we look at it, we don't get that message to not be like them. Because Jesus has gone before us, because he's paid the penalty for our sins, because he's took this death that was to be ours on the cross, we instead see it as a thing to model, as a thing that's modeled to us. as an example for us to follow. That because Jesus denied himself, went to the cross on our behalf, we live in response to him by doing the same. We deny ourselves. We follow him fully and completely because he has done all this for us. The idea gets continued a little bit later on. How are we to follow Jesus? Well, we love nothing more than we love him. We deny ourselves. And then verse 33, we'll skip down to that. It says, "So therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple." We love Jesus more than all others. We deny ourselves and we renounce all that we have. We seek our satisfaction, our fulfillment apart from possessions and treasures and wealth. Instead, we find it in Jesus, who has a vast value within him. He is a treasure that does not rust, that does not get lost, that cannot be taken from it. It does not depreciate. 3 times we see that phrase pop up. He cannot be my disciple. Anyone who loves something more than Jesus. Anyone who does not deny themselves as Jesus denied themselves. Anyone who seeks treasure apart from Jesus, that person cannot be Jesus' disciple, he says. Now we are saved by the free gift of God. That's not going away. This is not impacted by this passage. That is true. God has done it all to save us, and yet we respond to him by being his disciple. And being a disciple means this: loving Jesus more than all others, denying ourselves, finding our treasure solely in him. And the crux of the passage comes when Jesus says to count that cost. Is that something that we're willing to pay? To make that point, Jesus tells these 2 short parables. This is verse 28. It says, "For which of you desiring to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, 'This man began to build and was not able to finish.' Or what king going to encounter another king in war does not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? And if not, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace." Here we have these 2 massive undertakings, the building of this tower and the going to war. And in each of these, it requires planning. It requires putting thought into it, of thinking, do we have the means to complete this task, to complete this project, to complete this war? With this man in the tower, if he doesn't have the funds to see the entire project out, well, that would be an embarrassment, that this monument to his ineptitude will be there. It's partially created, and all can see that, and all will mock him. Or this king going to war, if he's not counting the cost to see, can I actually win this? Well, going to battle in that case would be more shameful than just accepting peace and surrendering now. Let me try to explain this. I, like many of you, are so excited that today is the first day of the World Cup. Judging by some of the looks on your faces, you might be discovering for the first time that today is the first day of the World Cup. I love the World Cup. I think it's probably the best tournament that humanity knows how to put on. And yet I hate the fact that Qatar is hosting the World Cup. And I don't mean this in a Semitic way, where like maybe I preferred it when Brazil did it. No, this is good old American hate, where I am filled with anger. Don't really want to get into all of that because it would take another hour and it would be a misuse of this stage. But when Qatar won the right, when Qatar was granted the right to host this World Cup, people were concerned. A nation of their size, could they do this massive undertaking? People from all over the world fly in to see this. It's a premier event. 32 national teams show up all at once, needing places to train, to recover, let alone the fact that they play 64 matches in 28 days. and all the infrastructure that needs to go into it for travel, for fans staying there throughout the duration of it. Can Qatar pull this off? And with today being the first day of the World Cup, it seems like the answer is not really. People have been showing pictures of their hotel rooms that they've booked, and it's a tent with a twin bed inside. Or you can upgrade, of course, where they have these repurposed shipping containers that you can stay in. Let alone the fact that schools are canceled for the next month in order to lessen the impact on traffic. There was these fan zones where fans could go and hang out, and it's a place to go in between games, or if you're not going to one of the games. The mock-ups were beautiful. The trees, this lush green area, like all sorts of amenities, and they're dirt fields right now. In all of this, it looks like they haven't been able to pull off what it is that they said they would, and this is with them lying to and exploiting migrant workers to make any of the progress that they have so far. It's been coming up in the news lately, and the response of seeing all these things is laughter, is mocking. That this was an opportunity for Qatar to have this worldwide audience where they could show what their country is like, where they could get support, where people could see them, where they could be front and center, and yet it all seems to be falling short. It seems to be an embarrassment. And what Jesus is saying with these illustrations, what the similarity with taking the illustration with the World Cup is Jesus has paid it all. We are saved by God. Nothing we did earn that. Nothing we did made God offer us salvation. We did nothing for that. Out of his great love for us, he has paid it all. He has offered the means for us to be saved. And we respond to God doing everything by giving him everything. And what Jesus says here is count the cost. Are you willing to follow him with everything? To consider him greater than anything else we might hold on to deny ourselves in pursuit of him, to seek treasure nowhere else apart from him. Are you willing to pay that price? Because there's no following Jesus part-time. There's no being part way through. There's no being 1 foot in and 1 foot out of following Jesus. Let's look at how Luke 14 ends. This is verse 34. He says, salt is good, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It's of no use either for the soil or for the manure pile. It is thrown away. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. So salt was so vital at the time. Wars were fought over salt because of how much its purpose was needed. It was used for food preservation, for seasoning of that food. It was used for fertilizer to help grow that food. It had so many important usages. And yet, if salt lost its saltiness, that what made it distinctive, that which made it valuable, if it lost all that was good about it, well, then it is useless. Even if it looked like salt, even if it appeared to still be valuable, if it lost what made it distinctive, all it was good for, it was being thrown out. What are we doing with our lives? Are we following after him with everything? Are we just looking the part? Are we living this life of follow the leader, learning from Jesus, mimicking Jesus in all things, turning to him for all things? Well, if we are, that is discipleship. But anything that falls short of that, well, it falls short of discipleship. 3 times Jesus says, he cannot be my disciple. 3 times, whether it's putting our love towards anything else, whether it's a refusal to deny ourselves or finding value apart from him. If we do that, we cannot be his disciple. Now again, this is not calling for us to have perfection. We're not there yet. We're not able to do that. We will be pulled in other directions. But what is our greatest desire? We may not be able to love him perfectly, but is he our greatest source of love? We may fall short of perfect obedience, but are we seeking to obey him overall? We may not always desire what he calls us to desire, but is he our greatest desire? The Christian life is glorious. We've been talking so much about the kingdom, the restoration of all things, tragedies being a thing of the past, mourning being something no longer required. It is a day that we are eager for. The Christian life is glorious, and yet it is also rigorous. Following Jesus takes everything. Now, remember the context here. There's this crowd that is accompanying Jesus. They're traveling with him, but just because they are following Jesus doesn't mean that they're following Jesus. They may be near him geographically, but that doesn't mean that they're near him spiritually. And so Jesus uses this harsh language here to jar the people, to get their attention, to show them what the cost of following him is. And spending time on this passage today is not meant to scare anyone. It's not meant to think, what if I'm not really following Jesus? No, it's to help us show what it takes to follow him. It's to show that we follow him with everything, with all that we have, not perfectly, but consistently, going to him for all things. And that the Christian life is not a giant bait and switch. Like, you are saved by grace, and then once you get in, well, let's actually show you what the real cost is. No, it's right here. Following Jesus takes everything. We respond to the incredible grace of God with all that we have. Because do you see the grace in this passage? A little bit subtle, but if you've been reading with us through the book of Luke, you might see it. Verse 25 again. Now great crowds accompanied him. Accompanied him where? Well, back in chapter 9, we saw that Jesus, I love the phrasing of Jesus has set his face towards Jerusalem, knowing that that's the place where he will suffer and die, knowing it's the place of incredible pain for him, knowing it's the place where he will go to the cross. We talked about the cross already, and yet what we see when Jesus does arrive in Jerusalem, that he takes this object of shame and he turns it into a throne. He takes this object I missed my wording of it, of humiliation, and he turns it into his exaltation. He takes this object of death and he frees all who follow him from the sting of death. And so we respond to that, this incredible grace poured out on us, this love that we did nothing to earn, this salvation that's offered freely, that he has paid it all. We did nothing to earn his love, and yet he lavishly poured out his love on us. We respond to this grace. We respond to Jesus going to the cross by us taking up our cross and following him. I have two charges for us as we finish our time together. The first is this, quite simply: follow Jesus. Be his disciple. That it's only in him that we find salvation. It's only in him that we find joy and peace. It's only in him that we have hope and a future. Follow him. And for those of us who are, I ask this question: what are we still trying to hold on to? What are we still trying to place more value in? What are we still trying to find our identity, our purpose in? Is it our families? Is it our work? Is it these plans that we have for our lives? Is it security and comfort? Is it what we have, our possessions, our valuables, our money? What is it that we're still trying to hold on to as something that gives us satisfaction? And yet we see a couple things in this. One, that the kingdom's coming. whether we acknowledge it or not. God's redemptive reign is certain. It is in our midst. It will fully come one day. And so whatever it is that we're trying to hold on to, those things are God's anyways, by right. All things belong to him. And so we turn over all things. We relinquish control of all things over to him because they are rightfully his. But also when we are captured by the beauty of the kingdom, when we see the beauty of the cross, well, what other response is there but to give him everything? When we see this God whose good pleasure it is to give, what other response is it for it to be other than our good pleasure than to give everything back? Follow Jesus. The second charge that I have is to use this season well. This is a time when we have lots of opportunities to invite people to things. In chapter 14, there's this talk about this feast and then this great banquet as well. And maybe it's thinking about the things that we have coming up, the parties that we might be going to, the things that we have on our calendar, the people that we might have over to our homes. Well, this is an ample opportunity to tell people of what our source of joy and life and peace and prosperity is. That while we are sitting next to each other at a table enjoying a meal, that we are delighted for the day when the great banquet is here. That this is an ample opportunity to invite people into conversations about why you trust and follow this Jesus, why you are willing to give everything in return to following him. And I know this sounds scary and a little bit intimidating. And yet I also think it's easier than we might think. That the opportunities to turn conversations into spiritual conversations are easier than we might realize. The language of Christmas is already in the air starting the day after Thanksgiving. It's already there that we can tap into and talk about the purposes of it. That as we reach the end of the year, people start to reflect, start to ponder, start to think about purposes or purposelessness. And it's a really easy opportunity to have people share with you what they believe, which is an on-ramp to sharing what you believe. And I know that still might sound scary and intimidating. So I just ask that you don't stop at that. It sounds hard, so I'm out. Please don't stop there. Ask for help, people around you in your life. Ask for ideas, ask for tips on this. We would love to help you as the staff here, and people in your life would love to help share ideas as well. Please don't stop just because it sounds hard. But in the meantime, while you're looking for ideas, I do again want to draw our attention to the fact that we have designed events at this time of year that are really easy opportunities to invite people to. Women's brunch is a really easy opportunity to invite people to. If you're not a woman or you're looking for something that's also really easy, carols and campfires. There's no service. We make s'mores. There's games. It's people playing things together. There's things for the kids, and then we sing songs. It's the easiest opportunity you have to invite someone to who doesn't want to step foot inside of a church, which is great because we don't even come inside the church. It's all outside. We have these cards for you back at the Hello Wall. Information about them is in your bulletin. It's a really easy opportunity to invite someone to something where there's no agenda other than we are here, we care about you, we are people shaped by Jesus, and we want to help people who are following Jesus to follow him even more. Because in all things, we want this place to be full of people discovering Jesus, worshiping him, drawing more and more near to him. Our goal is not just to have people who know how to sit down and breathe. We want people who are disciples, who are using all that they have to follow after him. That when we sing songs, yes, we are still short of perfection of following Jesus, and yet we can honestly sing, it is in Christ alone that we have hope and joy and peace and future. Because of what he's done, we respond to him with everything. Let me pray for us. Father, we are so grateful for this series that we've been going through in the book of Luke. And as we wrap up this first half, as we pause and we get ready to celebrate the wonder that is Jesus coming into this world, let us remember that it's because of him that we are disciples. It is because of him that we are following. That because of who he is and what he's done, we give back all that we have. That we love Jesus more than all others, even good things, people you've put in our life for a reason. And yet the love we have for Jesus surpasses all else. That we deny ourselves. That while we may have plans and things that we want to accomplish in our life, that we hold them loosely as we grasp onto you instead, who knows us, who knows what's good for us, and we follow you. That we treasure you above all else because all else can fade, but you are forever, and your love surpasses all. Father, we are eager for the day your kingdom comes, when distractions and mourning and loss and hurts are washed away. But until that day, we fix our eyes to you. We affix our affections to you. So it's to you and you alone that we pray.